Good afternoon, Traci Waldman Phillips, on this beautiful, beautiful June 5th, 2024 afternoon.
Well, I mean, what do I say to that? Good afternoon to you too, Wulwyn. I'm going to keep it short and sweet.
I'm telling you, hey, season 5, EP9, welcome to all eavesdroppers. Let us know where you're watching from, where you're listening from. Also, please let us comment whatever's on your mind. Let us know, of the kosher kind. We truly appreciate you being on here with us today. Traci, what's going on with you?
This has been a busy day for me so far. I know Wulwyn, like I come sliding in at a couple minutes before, and he's like, "Yeah, seriously." It's like, "Oh my gosh, where you?" He thought he was going to have a soliloquy on his hands again.
Nah, it was I trusted. I trusted in you. You would be here. You are that reliable.
I am that reliable. I'm glad to hear that.
Yes, you
On
are.
my epitaph, she was reliable.
Last week we started with I had placed the start of the show and didn't click the go live. And I'm looking at the the um the internet to see it come to share on YouTube and Facebook. I'm like, hold up, what's happening here? And then I looked up in the right hand corner, Go Live's looking at me like, and you remember how we laughed at it, and now we have the epitaph. She was reliable.
She was reliable. Well, I mean, I think in this day and age, you show up as is. You just show up. Like showing up is a big deal. It's so funny to me how when I'll get an email or something or a phone call and I'll get back to someone and they're like, "God, thanks so much for getting right back to me." I'm thinking, has it gotten that bad?
Wow.
Where people are so appreciative when somebody replies to them within a reasonable amount of time. And so yeah, I think showing up is a big, maybe that's going to be the theme. It tends to present itself like that, doesn't it?
And do you know that I think the other day I was speaking to a client, and they said, and we were just talking, and he said, and he's a younger 32-year-old chef, and he says, "Do you know?" I don't know where the conversation turned, and it went here. He said he took some flowers, purple candles, assorted cheesecakes, in a what else? A balloon, and he dropped it at his friend's doors, and his friend really, he said, at her doorsteps at 1 a.m. in the morning, and called her and said, he was texting her as he was doing it, "Happy birthday, hope you're having a great day," and while talking, he dropped it and he left. And he took a picture of, how Amazon takes a picture and says, "Hey, you have a delivery."
Yeah.
He took a picture of it, and she said, "Was it you at my door? I saw it on my ring just now." So he laughed, and then after we laughed, I said, "Man, you scored some brownie points." He said, "But do you know that in this day and age that there are certain women who say that you're lame or soft when you do such a thing, bring gifts, and it's as if you are working too hard for her?" I'm like, are you serious? Is that how the game is?
I don't think that's how the game is. I think that's how some people are right now.
But go into what you're saying. But no, the norm back in the days, and I'm saying, Lord, geez, back in the am I the one saying that back in the day, where you were, trying to become friends or date or marry someone, you would definitely go and give gifts. The word says that a gift opens the king's heart, right? Her heart opens towards you. My heart opens towards you. It's not even gifts, material gifts, but just presence and being around. But I hear in 2024 there's and I saw this a while ago. We were at I know I'm segueing slightly. We're at an event, a graduation party, and I saw this this guy say, "Excuse me, hey," and the lady turned around. Not the lady, the person turned around, because I don't think a lady will answer to "hey." She turned around and said, "Yeah," and she stood to listen, and I went, "Oh my goodness, the game is soft these days." I don't think where they're saying you're showing up, that's the norm. That should be the norm. Showing up and replying ASAP quickly to because that's your responsibility. If someone has looked at you, has looked at the entire the plethora of individuals and sent you an invitation or say, "Can you do?" and you reply to them and go, "Oh, thanks for replying." Likewise, on this end, they're thinking, "That's lame. I don't. You're too soft." It
Yeah,
happens.
that's a really great point. I think a lot of people are very okay, let me rephrase that. I think some people
Mm-hmm. There you
are
go.
in a space where there's a lot of projection going on, and I think that's always been true, right, of the world. But
Yeah.
I believe that we're in a space of trying to figure ourselves out, whereas before it was kind of like you follow like you said it, you follow kind of a societal norm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what everybody did. That was the framework. And you knew that, if you showed up within that societal norm, sorry about the dogs, somebody's at the front door apparently. Um, Hopefully that will not last long. But so you'd show up within that societal norm, you do the things you were taught to do in order to, be normalized, and things ran swimmingly. There is no
Mm-hmm.
norm. And I think we're trying to find a new framework. And so what I'm seeing a lot is people's familial patterns, right? So the way you were raised, the way your parents were raised, the way they were raised, their parents were raised, the way their parents were
Mm-hmm.
raised, right? You start to see these kind of societal pattern or familial patterns
Mm-hmm.
showing up, and everybody's family is different. So then you see different people, showing up differently. I think we're trying, part of finding ourselves means we have to leave what we've been following previously. So if we've been following societal norms as, oh, this is how I need to be, and we're
Mm-hmm.
trying to now determine who we need to be for ourselves, not for society, there's going to be this undoing before there's, kind of coming into your own. And I
Mm-hmm.
really feel like in many ways that what we're seeing a lot of that is that there's pushback. And in some cases, when I ask clients, I'm like, so I'm hearing resistance there. Why do you believe you're feeling resistant about this particular thing? And in many cases, they don't know. They're like, I don't really
Mm-hmm.
know. I just feel it. Like, well, where do you feel it in your body? And then a lot of times we can swim upstream and kind of find bits and pieces of that puzzle and start putting it together. But there's an undoing going on. And so one of those things becomes a extreme projection of societal norms, right? So if people are leaving that framework or that system, there's going to be a pushback on that system, kind of like the teenager who's trying to come into their own pushes back on the
Mm-hmm.
parents during those
Mm-hmm.
teenage years because they're trying to figure out who they are, and they're trying to push back, their parents up to now that point kind of, in many cases and in most ways, kind of dictates how you're supposed to be. And then that teenager is like, whoa, 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 whether they're conscious of it or not,
Gotcha.
I'm trying to become more independent. And so I think independence on a much larger scale, deeper scale, right now, what we're dealing with is we're first and foremost trying to show up for ourselves, but I mean, collective we're not really sure what that is yet. So just like the teenager fumbling through and trying to figure out their own sense of sovereignty and independence, right? There's no like playbook for this stuff. It's like
Correct. True.
parenting, right? Like, yeah, parenting. That's a whole nother topic. Um, but I think that there's an undoing right now. So people may be saying strange things like that, like, oh, he's being soft, or he's being too, like he's trying too hard or whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is,
Mm-hmm.
because in some ways it's a pushback. It actually has nothing to do with that person, because that, that's why I'm telling people, I'm like, how do you want to show up? Right? Because you'll know if somebody's for you based on how they'll respond to your legitimately and authentically showing up. If you are coming from an authentic space and somebody's like, ew, I'm like, they're not for you. Clearly.
Mm-hmm.
We don't,
Correct.
right? We
Correct.
don't need to change our I mean, especially if we're being authentic. If we're not being authentic, okay, then there's something we may want to look at there.
Mm-hmm.
But if we
Mm-hmm.
know we're coming from the heart and we're sincere, and this is how we really, this is integrity, what integrity looks like for us,
Yeah.
and we get pushback, then that is not an environment or person or situation we need to be investing our time and energy into.
So you're saying exactly what I told him in a different way. I said, hey, will that stop you from being who you are?
That's it.
Will that stop you from showing up and giving flowers and giving whatever you perceive the person how you express your love and affection? He says, no. I said, because the right person for you is going to accept that, receive it, and be very very grateful for it. But then the flip side of it is, uh, I think there's a thin line between the societal norm and a personal preference, because you have to ask the person, how do you want to be loved? Not everybody wants to receive flowers to say, oh, this stuff makes me sneeze.
Yeah, correct.
I don't want flowers. Give me the money. Give me an Amazon gift card. Give me something. But
Let's spend some time together. Yeah,
there
yeah,
you
yeah.
go. So that part. But I don't know if in your study, in what you've, in how you engage in culture, as you were saying, talking about societal norms, I thought about etiquette, thought about culture, thought about traditions, right? Those things, if I, in my mind, those things are sacred, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're sacred. There's a one person in the family who says, and then they label that person the black sheep because everybody went to college, and person goes, we all go to college in this family. Dad, I'm going to trade school. And in that case, the person is expressing themselves, yeah, but in terms of culture and traditions, the tradition of it. And I'm not, there's an American tradition, there's an African, and then there's the micro and the micro traditions that are in there. uh uh a Caucasian person isn't the same Caucasian person when you see the next one. They have different upbringings. Same thing with the African American, the Asian, whatever it is. When you talk about replying and someone going, um, I'm so happy you replied so quickly. Isn't that an erosion of the business culture, the etiquette of just being civil?
Just being,
Civility.
yeah, just acknowledging. That's what I always tell
Correct.
my daughter. I'm like, okay, so you know how you feel. This is a pet
Thank
peeve
you.
for her.
Thank you for
Is
saying that word.
acknowledging, right? We want to
Yes.
acknowledge. I mean, we don't want to feel like ghosts, where we're like, hi, and somebody just walks by. That's one of her pet peeves. Like she says, if I'm in the hallway at school and I say hi to someone and they keep walking, I'm like, well, they might not have overheard you. She's like, oh no, sometimes they do, and they just keep walking. I'm like, well, that is not a person you want to put any time and energy into. But I oftentimes will use that as an example, with her.
Mm,
It's like, how that kind of thing bothers you. Well, the reason it probably bothers you is you just want to be acknowledged. I mean, we
mm,
put ourselves out there, and it's like when somebody acts as if we're not there, it makes us feel invisible. And
yep.
no human being wants to feel invisible. No living thing wants to feel invisible. So
Mm,
it's simple acknowledgement is
mm,
the way I look at it. As I said,
mm,
you don't need to get all fancy and but if we don't acknowledge, I said this to actually a friend the other day. I said, may I point something out? Are you open to hearing something that I would like to share with you? And she says, I'm guessing it's not positive. I'm like, well, I mean, and I said again, are you open to hearing? And she's like, yes, of course. And I said, So a lot of times when I'm sharing something with you, I'm sharing a story or I'm sharing something on my heart, and you don't find that's not your interpretation of that thing, you go right into, well, that's not the way I see it, blah, 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 blah. And I said, which is fine, but I would just appreciate if you acknowledged me first. If you're like, oh yeah, I could totally see that, I actually see it a little bit differently, but I can see, or I acknowledge even that that's your interpretation, would you like to hear what mine might be? But you just go straight, almost as if I said nothing. Like it was just it's a launching pad for you to go into what you, and I said, and I have to be honest, I don't like that. It makes me feel very unheard. It makes me not want to share things with you.
Yeah. And what does she say? What's the end of the conversation?
Like, oh my gosh, thank you for pointing that out. Like, I mean, of course, she's a good friend, right? But she's like, yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. I tend to get in my own head. I'm in my own, and I'm thinking, I'm you're busy sharing, and so then I want to share. And she's like, you're right. Like acknowledging what you just said at the very least.
Yeah.
Is a segue that's important, because otherwise you don't have a conversation. You just have people spouting, and they just happen to be in a, spouting with each other.
Correct. I liken that to, I say this most of the time, if I'm speaking with you and you come and you'd say but, you start with but. Like, no, it's an and. You can butt my understanding of it. You can butt my reality.
I don't want your butt.
There you go. You can't. You don't give me your butt.
Give me your butt.
Start after my period. Don't put a comma and then bring the butt and start talking. That tells me that you really didn't hear me. And if you notice, when we're in our conversations here, I always pinpoint a couple of things that you say and say, when you said this, I may not agree with it, or I may agree with it, but I'm saying, okay, you know what you said, there were three things you said, and there's one part that I really want to talk about, I think that, and I believe that's what makes eavesdrop what it is, because when we first started talking, the conversation just went like that. I mean, and I'm doing a sign of the wave for those of you who will listen on the podcast and not see the video. So there's an ebb and a flow. Whereas if you're having a conversation, if you're not having a conversation, it comes where the person comes with a screeching stop. And then you come with yours and pick up from there, going where it's like I don't know. Have you driven a stick? You've driven a stick.
Oh
shift.
yeah.
There you go. So the gears aren't gearing. It's rubbing and scratching. So it's so important in our conversations, and I think even in the culture with the young ones, where they go with the earphones in the ear. Even the grown-ups, let me know when you say the young ones, because everybody, we all do it. You go in a room. I went to DC a couple of years ago when my mom came here, went to the hospital, and this is we went to the hospital where a lot of Hispanics went to, and when one of those people entered the room, it was a huge waiting room. They said, "Good morning." And then everybody replied, "Good morning." Like, and I sat there and I said, I'm going to observe something. Every single one of them good morning. When a different culture, when a different race got in there, the Caucasian got in there, sat down. The African American got in there, sat down. The Asian got in there and sat down. As soon as the Hispanic, "Good morning," and I go, that is so warming that they recognize they're coming in a space, and the folks they are acknowledging, and people are returning it, and all of a sudden there's a unity, there's a unit that has been created immediately. And once I recognize you and you recognize me and something starts to occur around or to me, I can come there and say, hey, what are you doing? No, don't. Versus me coming in my silo and just sitting there when something starts to happen around people like, well, they don't want us to say. Is that, do you think with the culture, the various traditions that when things are happening now in, say, in the schools where the children go, I'm gonna videotape that. I'm gonna tape that and not put the video down and go and say, stop fighting. I never went to school here. You went to school here in the States, right?
Yes.
Not in, I mean, high school and elementary.
Yes.
What was it like growing up without the phones when there was a fight, and not a planned fight? So a planned fight, I know a planned fight is, well, man, I'm going to meet you outside, and everybody like, oh, they're going outside to fight. But something that spontaneously got up. What was the reaction? Was it stop, or was it go? Was it sit down and watch?
I mean, I think there's different human beings that respond differently to that, right? So the people who would sit back and watch or go, "Ooh, fight," right? They would be the ones today on the phones filming.
Gotcha.
The equivalent of the ones that would be like, "Okay, guys, we need, like, stop. Like, this is ridiculous." There's still going to be those people today. They're not going to be filming. They're going to be in there, like, or calling someone because they don't want to get themselves, their own chops busted.
Correct.
But I think it's really humans. I do feel like because we are so, internet connected, that, we're seeing much more of what's going on, where before it was just our neck of the woods, because that's all we could see, right? Nobody was going around. There was no film crew going around filming our day to day, right? And so it was whatever we were personally experiencing. Now we could potentially be experiencing what, like, most of the world is experiencing at any one time. Yeah. It's experience overload because, really we're biologically only created to experience what we're experiencing and in our close proximity. But I think to answer your question, it really is, I think it's human nature. There's going to be, it's just people have different tools now.
That's true.
Where they may step back and watch themselves. Now they may want the whole world to watch, but yeah, so you said something about the Hispanic culture that, I wanted to make a comment about, because it just happened this week. I was talking to, so my daughter's best friend is Hispanic. Okay. And both of her parents are from Mexico, and so she's first generation American in her family. Her dad, I think, speaks some English, but her mom doesn't speak any. So it's fun when my daughter goes over there, because she's like, it's like, there's such love between my daughter and her friend's mother, but there's, there's no way. So they use a lot of hand gestures or different things. In Madison, has learned a little bit of Spanish and all that. But one of the things that we've always commented on, and I've said to her friend, is I love how the Hispanic culture really bonds together. Right. And how, when, as we've seen more and more people coming into this country and looking for jobs and that kind of thing, her home, to some degree of frustration for her being a teenage girl is like is like an inn for all of the friends and family that's coming over, looking for work. And so she always has some, family member, friend from, Mexico or other places, staying with them. And she was mentioning that they had family from Ecuador who was now living with them until they found, a job, and that they were just getting their working papers. And so, I started to think, I said, well, do you know what kind of work your uncle and your aunt would be looking for? And she told me, and I said, well, I know some people. And actually, I specifically know one client of mine who hires a lot of Spanish speaking people. And so they have crew members who are Spanish speaking and managers who are Spanish speaking and things like that. And so I said, well, let me reach out to him and see if they're looking for anybody, because, in a way they would, they're going to decide where they're going to live based on where they get jobs.
Correct.
And this particular client of mine is in a town where I started to think, well, I also know another person in that same town who has a cleaning company, and she also has a lot of Spanish speaking. In fact, their main office manager speaks Spanish, bilingual. And so basically I just made that connection. And I said, your culture is all about making connections for one another. And I said, I aspire, that's something I do naturally, but it meant so much to be able to make those connections.
Yeah.
Because I really believe that that's, and it also keeps the ball rolling. I said to her, I said, then you get your house back sooner.
Yes. Right?
So if I can help with that, honey, I'll do that. But, I think in general, it's one of those things that we invite people through back to you saying what you said to your friend, is that going to stop you from being who you are? Is that, if you want to show that kind of outreach and care and, gift giving, and, that's a part of who you are and how, you want to be, then you get to be that. That models what being in our own way of integrity and authenticity looks like.
Yeah.
Right. I really started thinking about it as I had just been talking to Madison about just how much I loved seeing that in the Hispanic culture, is that they are very culturally centered. They are very tribal in a way. If you think about how tribes gather around each other, and it doesn't even matter if, you're a part of my personal tribe or not, this is just how we are. This is how we meet the world. That inspires other people to think about that. Like it did you. You mentioned it, right? It did me. I normally am naturally a connector, but it made me go even more out of my way to say, I know how this culture works. I know what a big piece of currency is for them. And that currency for them is, who can you introduce me to? How can you support me through what I need, and trying to help make those connections between, what I'm looking for and, and where I can add value. And so it inspired me because of that conversation to think even further, like, wait a minute, I could probably make some introduction.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So when we're mirrors for the world, to invite them into, instead of saying, oh, the norm is not to give gifts now because then I'll look too soft. That's us changing based on what the world's telling us to be.
Correct.
As opposed to saying, I'm going to be authentically who I am, not even maybe thinking that that's also mirroring for other people, that it's okay to be authentic. It's okay to choose your own way.
Yeah. I when you said the big currency for them is connection, and I think, go on a limb and say the big currency for humans, it's connection.
We've forgotten that.
We so move from the Hispanic, or there are American towns and that are close knit, that are like this, right?
For sure.
Remove that and then bring it into the business. It's identical, where networking. It's what they are building. Everybody's building this need for economics on. Let's network, let's word of mouth, let's engage. And can you please put on Google the testimonial that you enjoyed it here, and you tell people to come here? Is exactly what we're doing with technology. But the underlying thing, the underlying currency, as you said, is connections. And when you said it like that, it puts so much color. It puts a picture on it that I can see the money transfer, and I can see cash going from hand to hand. And then when I remove cash and put connection, for every single connection that we create, there's something that's going to be built out of it.
100%. It's the win-win too. Like in the small ways, they want to be independent. Who doesn't? Who doesn't want to have their own home and their own job and feeling like they're a productive member of a society and, you know, all of that. And so they're looking to do that. And you know, like, so Madison's best friend calls me mom. And so it's like mom too. And, you know, so to help her too feel like she has some, you know, has her space back. That's important to her, especially right now at the age she is, and kind of just, you know, what's going on in the world and everything. And she's more introverted. She has a hard time always having people in her space.
Wow.
So it's that win-win. It's like, okay, how can I help everybody get what they need? Because I have the resources. Right? Resources can be knowledge. Resources, like you said, can be networks of people. Resources can be money, and resources can be time. And, you know, so if I have the resources, you know, to give everybody what they need so that they can move forward. And, you know, there's a difference. People often ask, well, what's the difference between saving someone and supporting them? And, you know, it's because you get them a job that easily. They didn't have to work for it. I'm like, well, first of all, they don't speak English. And so it's going to probably take them longer, you know, and they do tend to then have to stay in a particular environment because then they have to be reliant on the resources of the people they know. So this gives them even more of a branch out. I look at that as support because they're helping themselves by taking the time to get a legitimate work permit, taking the time to share with the people they do know that they are looking for a job. They're doing what they can.
Correct.
Versus sitting on a couch going, I need a job and not doing anything. If I then swoop in and say, well, that's probably saving them. But, you know, when you've got people legitimately trying, you know, to put the right things in place for themselves, then that's support.
Correct.
And, you know, and when you just right place, right time, because the other thing on the other side is the people who I introduced them to were like, oh my gosh, yes, we're looking for people. Right. So they need people because it's busy season for both these companies. And so it's, you know, it's kind of that thing where but why we do it, you know, why we give gifts or why we share our resources or why, again, it goes back to the heart. It's like, it just feels right to connect. I mean, because we feel then connective. And I believe that part of loneliness is when we're not also giving of ourselves in some way to the collective. Somehow we're holding back ourselves, you know, that idea of, I don't want people that's soft. I don't want people giving me gifts. I don't want men opening doors for me. I can take care of myself. You know, this whole movement of, but it seems very reactive. It feels very defensive to me. It doesn't feel like I want to stand on my own 2 feet. Thank you, but I'm good. You know, it doesn't feel like that at all. It feels very defensive, like I said, and yet then we're creating this loop of more anger because then we push people away, and then we're like, there are no good men out there, and no, you know, and it's like, honey, we need to have a serious heart-to-heart, you know. And I'm just using one example, but I think we see this in pockets all over, you know, and when we don't realize that our loneliness is because first and foremost, we're probably closing ourselves off from that connection, feeling connected and connective, right? When we pull back all our resources and we don't share them with anyone.
Wow.
Right. And then we're like, I feel so lonely. It's like Scrooge, right? Like it's a perfect story of like the poor man was lonely because he was just so, you know,
wow.
tight.
You know, I was typing, and then you said loneliness is, and you kept talking, and you went fast. I was like, oh my goodness, I hope she comes back to it. So it's closing ourselves to the connection and holding back on our own resources. You know, I hear this all the time. When you want to feel, not when you want to feel good about yourself, but when you give and go and volunteer, right? You go and do something for someone. you before doing it, you think that it's I'm gonna go to that place again. But when you go, it so revives your soul. It revives you, and then when you're doing it, you and at the end you're like, oh my goodness, this some dopamine, something just pushes up in you. You know, some new energy comes up, and you're like, oh wow, this. And you have individuals who are so good at one connecting, two so good at giving, and they give and but they are full
Yes.
rather than they gave and then they go down and go, oh, I gotta go and resuscitate, I need to go, even though you need to rest, in these processes. But when you define that loneliness as that, as hoarding instead of pushing out and giving, that surely you're giving me a lot of pictures today, Traci. I see
Yeah, you've been
currency.
very good about illustrating what those pictures look like for us.
I see currency. I see hoarding, and where you're thinking you're getting a whole lot. It's not. It's not a whole lot. It's
Well, that's why
zero.
people hoard too. Like they're afraid of losing. It's that lack mentality. But what it does is it
Mm,
creates more lack. Instead of like, if I hold on to this, then I'll have what I need. And it's like, no, then you just fetter it away. I mean, life isn't about having stuff.
mm,
It's really
mm,
about having connection. And I think more and
mm.
more people are kind of waking up to that. I mean, we definitely see younger generations who are like, we don't need all this stuff. We actually want to make a difference.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, giving us more money is not really going to make us stay at a company that's toxic. If we can't make a difference, we don't have a seat at the table, if our voice isn't heard, we're really not interested because we can't make a difference. And so I think that we're also coming out of some of these norms that we've been in that seemingly make the world go round, are shifting, and I don't think in bad ways. I think it
Correct.
really, what do you think?
No,
I see your face.
oh, oh my goodness, again, a picture. So
You
what
and
you
your
just,
pictures are like
what, I'm serious. So you see how you said kids, the young folks these days do not, they're not so tied to money. It's about, what they,
the
it's about
contribution.
them,
It's about
contribution.
contribution. Hmm.
And as I'm listening to you, I see the reason why this generation can do that is because their parents are not their grandparents. Now, let me clarify that. Their parents are not their grandparents. If it were the grandparents, why are we the way we are? Because at 18 or at 22 or at 25, your dad said, sweetheart, peace out. You got to go. You're a man or a woman.
That's
Bye.
right.
And
Hmm.
you have to go. And and you just talked about the culture that comes in, or anybody who moves to a new place and they have to go and stay and stick there and gut it out. And even if it's a toxic environment, they're there going, but I need to be here to pay my rent. I need to be here to take my food. I
Mm-hmm.
need what the current generation, what they have is mom and dad homes are open.
Yep.
Mom and dad's homes are open, and mom and dad understand hmm, that is it was it a right way that my dad or my parents treated me to put me out, and I'm there going treading water, getting under, coming up. No. So maybe what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the norm. Okay, we're getting full circle here. I'm going to change the societal norm and say, sweetheart, you can go. And if it doesn't work, you have a place here. Come back, regroup, and relaunch. I don't think the generation before, or two generations before, had that. So
No.
we are enabling, and I hope they watch this podcast. We
Send it
are
to the
in,
young people.
yeah, because you guys will not be able to do it if we didn't understand the plight that we went through, or if not the plight, if we aren't understanding to say, you know what, it's okay for you to come back and regroup and go out and relaunch. Why are we that way?
Well, we are that way. And I think, furthermore, though, I always feel like it isn't just about being reactive to how we were raised. It's also about looking into the future about what our children will need. What did we learn by being raised by those parents that our kids are also going to need in order to create their own substantial something for their kids to be able to come back to and rely on if they need to. Right. So it's that idea of tribe. I think we're getting back if we start to integrate. And actually, tomorrow I'm going to a full day workshop on the generational differences in the workplace. And this is the second time I've done this with this particular woman, Dr. Catherine Jeffrey, who is a brilliant woman who's an expert in generational differences. And I did this workshop with Vistage a couple years ago, and she's coming back, and I'm doing it again because she always brings new, fresh information, and it's just so great. But I think thinking in terms of generations, it is that piece of saying it isn't just about being. Again, we understand that we have raised our children almost every generation does this, raise them reactively. I mean, my mother did this. Like she had a very volatile family life, childhood. There's a lot of poverty and a lot of struggle, and she didn't want that for her kids. And so she chose to put herself in environments. She chose to educate herself. She chose to do so that that her kids would have more than she had, but also to have that stability she didn't have. Right. So as a reaction that definitely was a benefit, both my brother and I are privately schooled, and, had all these wonderful opportunities because she chose the way she did.
Correct.
But then I look at some of the other things too that, we did need to know about what it was like, and why I think now looking back, I begged my parents to let me go to public high school because I felt very protected and cuddled in the private educational world, especially the school I went to, which was very prestigious and, only had certain types of people and all that. And I'm like, that's not life. And as the person I am, and of course I wasn't ready for what ended up happening, which I got bussed into like the neighborhood where at the time the Bloods and the Crips, it was the big gang time. And so our school was the dividing line between the Crips and the Bloods. So there was shootings all the time. I mean, I went into like being coddled to like,
where was this?
Battlefront. This was in Denver.
In Denver.
This was in Denver in the 1980s. Yeah, 1980s were the big time where all of the big gangs moved from California into Colorado, into the like Midwestern towns. Colorado was a big one. Oh yeah, we had gang initiation like stuff on TV all the time. Like you could just be riding your bike down the road and be a part of a gang initiation. Just be shot because that was part of the initiation process. Yeah, I mean I remember a couple summers where it was not really safe to go outside a lot of time, anywhere in Denver. This wasn't just in certain neighborhoods. Yeah. And there was a lot of people breaking into homes and, it was pretty bad.
Wow.
And you think about, I mean, you lived through war in your country, and so I think about those times and like what, looking back, I'm like, I don't remember not just living. I don't remember like being holed up in my house, like I can't go out or I can't, lock down or anything. I don't remember living that way. And so there must be this resiliency, that we have that's like, well, it is what it is. You have to, try to be as safe as you can, but you can't stop living.
Correct.
And so that's the piece that I look back that I had, like it just, and everybody else was doing this too. I guess there may be some people who were locking down in their homes and not going out, but it's not like all of a sudden, like where it was during quarantine, where you could drive down the street and it was like, Tumbleweedville, I mean,
correct.
I don't ever remember not seeing people around me outside. And yet the resiliency piece, I think, is what is harder on the generations. Like I don't see as much resilience. And I think one of the reasons, like I told my daughter at a very young age, I remember her getting off the bus when she was, I think maybe in third grade, and she had been bullied, and she was sharing that with me, and we were just kind of talking through it. And I said, well, what do you think you need to do? And she's like, well, I don't know, Mom. And I said, would you feel like you would want me to call? Because, we live in a small community and like, I know who these kids' parents are, kind of thing. Do you want me to call the parents and have some conversation? No, Mom, not at this point, and I said, well, I want you to be proactive. I don't want you not to do anything. But I also feel very, very strongly that I am here to physically protect you as much as possible.
Yeah.
But it's your job to develop your emotional resiliency. So I'm not here to emotionally protect you. Right? And I see that as a difference. I see a lot of parents trying to coddle their kids emotionally. Oh my God, my kid can't be anxious. My kid can't be sad. My kid can't be disappointed. My kid can't be, excuse me if I'm triggering anybody right now, but I see so much of this, and then kids don't learn how to be resilient in their emotions. They don't develop good emotional intelligence. Now, I'm not saying leave them out to dry, because we continue to have conversations. But I also didn't want to just swoop in and save my daughter. I wanted her to know that she had a choice to make, even at the, that age. Third grade. And how old are they? 10? Like, I lose track of like how old they are at those different ages. But
they start at 5.
They start at 5. Yeah, so that helps. The kindergarten, and then first grade is 6, and then
8, 9.
Yeah. So
wow.
And there was obviously a lot of conversation growing up. She was a very, I think, ahead of her game, individual, being an only child too, around a lot of adults, that type of thing. Correct. But I felt so strongly about that. And I remember my husband and I even talking about it. He's like, do you feel like we should, shouldn't we be doing something? I'm like, we are doing something. We're co-collaborating with our daughter. I don't want her to feel like she has to run to us to fix everything in life. And at some point, we have to start making that transition. Now, if I start to watch things and I see things going downhill, you better believe I'm going to step in and do something. But because that comes down to physical protection too, right? But I know I went through some real emotional trauma throughout my life. And I think the reason why I am the way I am is because I had to learn how to be resilient in it. I had to. I didn't have anybody coming. In fact, a lot of it was coming from the people that would normally be there to protect you. So it's one of those things that it just, I don't know. And every kid is different. Like, I realize that, but we really need to think before we just reactively go in and start to try to make it better all the time. Because I see this with my clients too. I got to go fix all the problems that my employees are messing up. And like, okay, do you? Do you need to get in there and fix it? Or do you need to have conversations with them and support them to fix it? To take responsibility. Like, you're angry that they're not taking responsibility and accountability, but how are you giving them the opportunity to
do such? When you are going to do it.
Where you just, every time they mess up, you just like, I'll do it. I guess I'm going to have to do everything.
Yeah. You're saying that, and I see that in the house. When I was in Liberia, I returned after 8 months, and I came in the garage to go and get the power cord, the extension cord, to blow the leaves. And I see the plug just sitting next to where it has been cut. It's just sitting there, and I go, who
cut the cord?
Who cut the cord? Yeah, I know, right? Cable says cut the cord. Streaming says cut the cord, cut the cable cord. I'm like, who cut the cord? So I needed to do it immediately. So I fixed it, zzz, red to red, black to black, wrapped it around, plugged it in, and went. I went and I saw another cord. Like, who's cutting the cord? Is Verlin going out with trying to do something with it? And come to find out, Wulwyn, my son, is using it to do the hedges right, to cut him,
Oh, and he's cutting the
and
cord.
he's cutting the cord, and mistakenly, he rips it because it's electrical. It's the blade goes because you have to put the cord around you, so
Mm,
it's not. And it's happened to me before, but I looked at him and said, never again. You are going to fix these things. As soon as you cut them, you don't just who's the person who will come behind you to fix them. The I, I'm not here. And when it's time to use it again, are you going to buy a new one every time you cut it? You buy a new one. And I said,
mm.
I've shown you how to do this. Just connect this, strip it. Here's the stripper. Bum bum. Put it in there, and you wrap it with the electrical tape. Um, so every other thing in the house I have been, the person fixing, screwing, doing this. And I told him, I said, son, moving forward, I'm not touching a single thing again. I know how to do it. Now you are the one who's going to mess up. If the electrical, I'm going to tell you, cut the breaker off first.
Yeah.
turn the
Oh,
turn
my
the breaker
grandmother
off
issues.
first. Yeah, yeah. Mom's not going to like that. But turn the breaker off and do what you got to do. Investigate it. See if it's fixed. Here's the meter. Test it. Oh, dad. I'm like, oh, daddy, you know the difference between old daddy and calling someone to fix it? You may have the money. I don't know. I mean, I have the money, but I love doing this. But we tend to, as you were saying, and I'm saying this in terms of something physical, but then the emotional part, we tend to go in there and jump in front and go, my child, da, 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 da. And every time I see that, a child who can speak for him or herself, and the parent comes in, you can see the dynamics of the child being embarrassed in that thing, saying, I could have handled this, mom. And they're just, are they embarrassed because their friends look and say, oh, big girl like you or big guy like you, your mom's fighting for you? Maybe. But I think it's, I told you I could take care of this. And it's always a mismatch when I see those recordings, as we've talked about, someone with a camera recording that interaction and go, wow, that child or that person could have stood up for themselves. And sometimes, Traci, it's you will beat me down to the ground for a while with some coaching and mentoring, right? I say this and I turn this over to you to close us up because we got 6 more minutes. Verlin in Liberia. She had traveled from the States, went back to Liberia elementary school. Every single day they're beating on Verlin. Every single in Liberia. So we have an aunt. She has an aunt. Her name is Weade. Auntie Weade says, little girl, they're just beating on you and you come here every day crying. And she goes, she says, let's go. Put Verlin in karate school and told her,
Uh-oh.
you are going to learn how to fight back.
Mm,
And Verlin learned a couple of moves. She said she went back to school. And when this group came, bam, 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 it stopped. They had to start calling her mom over to say, your daughter's beating everybody. Say, what were you calling the other parents when they were beating her up? Now is it because she's beating them up? And she was given a tool, which was to self-defend, to work on. As you were saying earlier, give the tools
yeah,
and mentor and coach.
that's it.
Now, that's not how the way you do it. Go ahead and do it this way. No, no, no. You didn't do it the right way. Next time, engage. Do this. Do the other. And I think that's how they can leave the house. We're not pushing them out. They can leave the house and be confident that
Yes.
they can engage and succeed.
Yeah, 100%.
Mm.
I love that. So I have an executive women's group that I run, and quarterly we do these in person. Normally it's just a virtual meeting, every month, but quarterly
Mm-hmm.
we do an in person event. And so I, always looking for different things. And I started to think about my daughter. Her top school is in a pretty, if she gets in, is in a pretty busy city.
Okay.
Like it's right in the middle of a city, and it's very big. And I started thinking, I'm like, what am I going to want my child to know? Because my child is,
Mm.
she's very smart, very smart. she's not always aware.
Mhm.
And I said to my husband, I said, I really want to give Maddie tools, to prepare her for life in general. And so I was thinking, I was like,
Mm.
what I'm going to do for the women's executive group, and Madison's coming with me, and actually now her best friend is also coming with us, is a self-defense class.
Mhm.
Is to teach them, what, how to defend themselves and
Yep.
what tools are available. Get those girls some stun guns and just tell them that they
Correct.
can only use them under certain circumstances.
Correct.
You
Yeah.
don't use this on a boyfriend that you're pissed off at.
Mhm.
But I mean, it's one of those things that it's the tools and the strategies and
Yeah.
that again, instead of thinking to do it for them, because we're not always going to be
Mm.
there.
No. No.
We need to give our children what empowers them to be able to go forward and feel confident in the world as much as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. You said tools and strategy. So a couple years ago we were going for a vacation, and we said we will save. I think this was 2018 or 2019. We'll save from the business. We'll save from Verlin's work, and if we wanted to do anything extraordinary, we'll have to find the money. And I was like, oh, all right, I'll drive Uber. I'll do Uber. I'll say it's from 8, because I would sit and watch NBA games from 8 to 2 o'clock in the morning, right?
Mm-hmm.
There were East Coast games and West Coast games. And I said,
Yeah.
nah, hold up. I'm just going to get in the car and drive. So I'm driving, and I'm meeting all sorts of characters from all different races. And Verlin goes, aren't you afraid? I'm like, no, I'm not. Because I'm a chameleon. When someone gets in the car and goes, "Rah!" I go, rah, man. And I hit them, like, yeah, brah. That's how we do it. And then they're like, oh, okay, you. And then they everything they do, the way they behave, I just behave the identical way. When they
Measure.
cuss, I go, say, yeah, man. But I mull it, dull it down. Whereas because they're looking for a position of power. I mean, one had the nerve to ask me a couple of questions. You can go in that dark place, man. Take me to that dark place. Are you afraid? I said, the question should be, are you afraid of what I would do to you? He said, oh man, I like you. I like you. And if I had said, so part of the tools, I've told Jazz and Wulwyn, when you're engaging with individuals and you see them, they're looking in your eyes to find a sense of weakness. A dog looks for that. A dog, if it's coming to you and you go, it's going to. I said, just look at them in the eye and turn it back on them. So find with, in addition to the self-defense, is that reverse psychology too, right? Because that's how she's smart, and she can use her IQ to just change up on them and then go, oh, I wasn't expecting that of you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think part of it is, what will it take for us to feel confident in our own skin? And that's that's opening up a complete other can of worms, because being confident in our skin is that ability to embody, right? That what we're inviting people, to receive.
Yeah.
And what is that? If we get to decide what we put out into the world, what is that? What is that we want to put out there in the world, right? And how do we embody that? How do we feel comfortable in that? So, yeah.
Traci, can you imagine another
Went
hour?
fast. Yeah, I know. It always does. It always
Close
does.
us up. Close us up. You close us up. You got what, 30 seconds?
Well, I will just thank everybody for being here. Those who are here, those who are watching, replay. Thank you for doing that. And we hope you're enjoying what we put out there. We certainly are enjoying putting it out there. So, I'd say hopefully we'll see you next 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, next 2 weeks. Traci, good seeing you again.
Always good to see you too, Wulwyn.
Take care. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye, everyone.